Once upon a time, in the village of Ogunle, there lived a young girl named Ene. Ene was a very beautiful girl and also very intelligent. Ene was a definition of beauty with brain. Ene's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ochoyoda, were very proud of how intelligent their daughter was. In the village, Ene was always used by other parents as reference points because she always came top of her class. Ene has always dreamt of becoming a medical doctor. She had severally pictured herself in the hospital, taking care of sick people and proffering medical solutions. Ene was also a very respectful girl, as whenever she sees an elderly person, she would never fail to acknowledge them and greet them. Whenever Ene was returning from school, she would also pass through villagers sitting at the front of their houses, but she never failed to greet them. One of such was Oche, who would also answer Ene with a warm smile whenever she was passing by and greeted them. When Ene was in her final year in high school, the unexpected happened. Ene lost her father to the cold hand of death. Though Ene's parents were not rich, they always did their best in taking care of their children. Now, the death of Ene's father, Mr. Ochoyoda, broke them as they found it difficult to survive or even to barely eat. Ene's mother, Ojima, at that time was nursing her last baby when she lost her husband, so she was not able to properly fend for the family. Ene's family were pulling through the difficult time gradually, but soon Ene's dream of becoming a medical doctor looked like it was going to be a mere dream after all. Ene could not pay for her enrollment fee to sit for her final secondary school examination. Ene could not believe it that everyone in her class had already enrolled for the examination except her. Ene wanted her dream of becoming a medical doctor to come true so badly. One day, as Ene was on her way back from school, she thought of the fact that the school had informed them that the next day was going to be the last day for the enrollment. Hot tears ran down Ene's cheeks as her all-time dreams seems impossible. That was when Oche saw Ene crying. "Ene, what is it? Why are you crying?" he said, feeling very concerned. I need money to pay for my enrollment and the deadline is tomorrow," Ene said, crying bitterly. "How much is it?" Oche asked. Ene told Oche the amount, not sure why he had asked. "Do not worry, I will give you the money," Oche said. Ene was shocked because it was a miracle she did not see coming. "Okay, follow me, I would give you the money." Ene followed Oche to his house to get the money. Oche gave Ene the money. Ene was very excited as she thanked him for his kind gesture. As Ene was about to leave, Oche locked the door and said, "Not just yet." Oche pounced on Ene. Ene was in shock, feeling frightened and begged Oche. However, Oche violated Ene's innocence. Ene could not believe her eyes, as what she had thought was a miracle some few minutes ago became her worst nightmare. Ene wept bitterly. Oche threatened Ene not to mention what had happened to anyone. Ene would lock herself in her room, crying. She was pained. But then again, she took the money Oche had given to her and registered for the final examination in her school. Ene would read all night because She wanted to pass, not just pass, but she wanted to be one of the best in the general exam so she could secure admission to study in the university. However, Annie fell ill as she would throw up non-stop and she was always coming down with sickness. Alas, when a medical test was carried out on her in the village clinic, Annie was confirmed pregnant. Annie's world came crashing down right at her face when she discovered that she was pregnant. And Annie was just too sick to even sit for her examination. Annie's mother, Ojima, was very disappointed at Annie because she had raised Annie very well. Annie, how can you do this to this family? Annie, you have always been a good girl. Why did you decide to disgrace our family like this? Annie's mother, Ojima, said as she wept bitterly. Now, Ene, tell me, who is responsible for your pregnancy? Ojima asked angrily. In fact, stand up and take me to that idiot that did this to you, Ojima said furiously. At first, Ene was reluctant and afraid, but when she saw her furious mother, she had no choice but to take Ojima, her mother, to Oche's house. On getting to the house, they knocked at the door and no one answered. So they decided to ask neighbors around who told them that Oche had packed out of the house the previous night. Apparently, Oche got a wind of Enne's pregnancy, so he quickly gathered his few belongings and ran away from the village. Ene and her mother had to come back home without setting their eyes on Oche. Ojima was so angry at Ene, she would shout at her and tell her how stupid and loose and miserable Ene was. Ene would cry and cry. Soon, Ene's problem was no longer how to become a medical doctor, but how she was going to give birth to the child, knowing fully well how miserable she was and how she had no money at all. Ene tried to take a lot of alcohol secretly as she thought that it would get rid of the pregnancy, but the pregnancy remained intact. Ene would take up an axe, trying to break log of firewood, hoping that the strain would get rid of the pregnancy. But the pregnancy remained intact. Ene had tried several means to get rid of the pregnancy, but it did not work. So she had to resolve to her fate as she was tired of trying too hard. Ene had to devise ways to survive, at least before she gave birth. So she would hawk oranges along the street to at least make ends meet. One day, as she was hawking round the village street, she bumped into some of her classmates. Ene was ashamed as soon as she saw them, but she had to summon the courage to continue walking. The moment her former classmates saw her, they busted out laughing, pointing at Ene. See her. She said she wanted to become a medical doctor. Every time, she wouldn't even allow us hear word in the class. But now, see her. She's even hawking oranges, they said as they laughed at Ene loudly. Ene continued walking, but she could not hold back the tears. She cried as she walked past them without even saying a word. Ene could not even afford to register for antenatal, as the little money she had, she would always use it to at least cook something for her to eat. One day, Ene was at home when her contraction started. She was in severe pain as her mother had no choice but to rush her to the village clinic where she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. After the birth of Ihotu, Ene's daughter, Ene was depressed. She was tired of life. Ene could not believe the reality that she was living. She had dreamt of being a great doctor and taking her parents round the world. But now, her life was even worse off than what she was running away from. Ene could not even afford to give her daughter Ihotu food. Ihotu, Ene's baby, would cry and cry because of hunger. At first, Ene was angry at her baby Ihotu for coming into her life and changing the trajectory of life. But however, she knew that Ihotu, her baby, was innocent and did not ask to be born. Ene would carry Ihotu at her back and hawk round the village so that she would be able to feed her daughter. Ene was always exhausted as she did not get to rest. Ene would sometimes clear people's farm for a fee just to make ends meet. One day, Ene could no longer take the hardship she was facing, so she started pondering on ways to escape from her current reality. No, Ene, you can't continue like this. You can't continue to live from hand to mouth. Ene thought to herself deeply. So, one day, Ene packed few of her clothes very early in the morning before it was daybreak. She went in front of her mother Ojima's house. So, she carried Ojima and kept her in front of her mother's house so that she would be the first person her mother Ojima would see when she opened the door. Before she dropped Ihotu, her baby, and looking at her baby, she said, Ihotu, my baby, I love you, but I need to do this for us. Ene said silently as she abandoned Ihotu, her baby, there and left the village. When Ojima, Ene's mother, opened the door, she was shocked to see Ihotu, her granddaughter, crying without Ene in sight. Ojima held Ihotu as she walked round the compound, shouting and calling Ene, 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 where are you? Come and carry your child, oh! Ojima said, already getting angry. But Ene was nowhere on sight. Throughout that day, Ojima waited for Ene, thinking of what she would do to Ene if she finally returned back home. But to her greatest surprise, that day passed without Ene showing up. Soon, Ojima got really worried, wondering what must have happened to Ene. But she had no choice but to take care of Ihotu, her granddaughter, hoping that someday she would be back and praying that something bad had not happened to Ene. Ene got to the city and had nowhere to stay. She did not know anyone around, but she knew that somehow she was going to survive. So she immediately started scouting for jobs, but it was very difficult to get one because she did not even have a high school or secondary school certificate, not to talk of a university degree. When it was night time, Ene would look for a nearby church that was probably doing an all-night program and would sleep there. She continued like that for 1 week until she was able to secure a job at a beer parlor. Ene was excited when she was given the offer. She was very diligent at her job, but she only was able to work there for 2 months until the manager started asking her to sleep with him and she refused firmly, and then he lied against her and fired her. Ene was frustrated. What have I done to deserve this kind of treatment? She thought to herself. She had tried so hard to make something out of life, But the more she tried, the more things became worse and more complicated for her. One day, she saw a vacancy for a nanny, so she decided to try her luck. And fortunately for her, she got a job as a nanny for a very wealthy family. Her job was to take care of their daughter. Ene did it with so much joy as the baby reminded her of her own daughter in the village that she had abandoned. Ene took care of the baby very well, and her boss was very pleased with her. Sometimes she would whisper to the baby as if she was Ihotu, her baby, and she would say, "Please forgive me. I did it for us." As if the baby understood what she was saying, she would let out a warm smile. However, Sokudo, the boss's husband, started trying to have his way with her sexually. So, Ene one day had to submit her resignation letter and left the house. She had only worked with them for 6 months and was able to save up some money. She used the money to start selling pepper in the market. Soon, she added tomatoes to it. It was not easy for Ene as she had to sell under the hot scorching sun. Sometimes sales was bad, and because it was perishable, she would run at loss. But it did not stop Ene from trying harder. Ene was very polite to her customers and she gave them that remarkable smile. But deep down, no one knew the demons she was fighting inside. She was able to rent a makeshift room in the suburb of the city. When it was nighttime, Ene would cry, wondering what life was like for her baby Ihotu. She wondered if Ihotu, her baby, was even feeding well. Sometimes she had the fear of not losing her baby to the cold hands of death. Ene would cry. She would pray that her baby was in safe hands in the village. Ene, though, was very beautiful, but she did not have any time for leisure. She focused all her energy in building her small tomatoes and pepper business. After 8 years in the city, Ene summoned the courage to go back to the village and see how Ihotu, her daughter, was doing. At least, she was not where she wanted to be, but definitely, she was not where she used to be, as she became a better version of herself and at least had little savings. When Ene got to the village, she went straight to her mother Ojima's house where she had left her daughter. But unfortunately for her, her mother was no longer living there. She asked people around and they told her her mother had moved to the next village. On getting to the next village, Ene asked around for hours, describing her mother Ojima to strangers who might know her. Ojima, her mother. Eventually, someone offered to show her where they lived. Her mother was now living in a hut in the middle of a bush, together with Ene's daughter Ihotu and two of Ene's siblings. Ene cried her eyes out, seeing the state of things. What broke her the most was Ihotu, her daughter, who could not even recognize her. Ihotu, her daughter, was already 9 years old. After staying for 3 days in the village, Ene knew that she had to go back to the city to continue her business there. But this time around, she could not stand leaving her daughter in the village. She had to take Ihotu, her daughter, to the city with her. She pleaded with her mother to please forgive her because she had really wronged her in so many ways. She promised Ojima, her mother, that she would occasionally send them money and that things would get better and they would get out of poverty. When Ene got back to the city, she had to put Ihotu, her daughter, in a public school. Ihotu, Ene's daughter, was very smart and intelligent. After spending 2 sections in her new school, she became the top of her class. Ene's business started progressing a lot better as she soon added other food items to it. She would occasionally send money to her mother and siblings in the village. The financial burden on Ene was so much, but she told herself that she was going to keep pushing regardless. Ene soon got a big break in her business when one of her customers asked her to please help her get good quality local rice. Ene was angry at first because obviously she was not selling rice. But on the second thought, Ene had to start sourcing for good quality local rice all over the city. And she did not get a tasteful one. So she went to her village to source for it because she knew that they had good quality local rice in her village. Ene returned back and gave the sample of the rice to the woman. The woman was astonished and really loved it. Then she ordered for 10 bags of the rice. Ene supplied the woman. Ene was happy that she was able to make at least a reasonable gain from it. But surprisingly, the woman returned back after a week and asked for a supply of 100 bags of rice. This time, Ene had to go back to the village and rehearse with the rice farmers at the meal factory. Ene supplied the woman 100 bags of rice and made a lot of profit from the sales. Soon, people in the city started talking about the rice and how tasteful it was. Ene became a major supplier of the rice in the city. She was now able to send her daughter Ihotu to a good school, the type she had wished for if she had money. Ihotu did well in schoolwork as she was an excellent student. Ene had to build her own rice mill factory in the village so she would get produce from rice farmers all over her village and the neighboring villages who had the special of the local rice she wanted. Ene's special local rice soon became a big brand that others came from different states of the country and even abroad to purchase. Ene's daughter Ihotu finished her secondary school in an excellent grade. So one day, Ene had to sit her down to know what course she would love to do moving forward. As Ene's daughter Ihotu had excellent grades in all the subjects she offered in school. Mommy, I want to become a medical doctor, Ihotu said. Flash of memories ran through Ene's mind as she remembered how she dreamt of becoming a medical doctor. But now, she was a successful businesswoman who got pregnant at 16 years old and had to struggle to survive. Now, she was looking at her 16 years old daughter who wants to be the exact same thing she wished for 16 years ago. Ene was moved to tears. My daughter, you are sure that is what you want to do? Ene asked Ihotu. Yes, mother, I've always wanted to be a surgeon, Ihotu said firmly. Ene hugged Ihotu, her daughter, as her dream was about to come true through Ihotu, her daughter. Do not worry, I will make sure you go to the best university. After all, you are a genius, my child, Ene said, smiling. Ene sent Ihotu abroad at age 18 to study medicine and surgery at one of the best universities in the world. This is a story on resilience. Are you almost giving up? Please don't dare quit. Keep pushing and see how your dreams come true. Tell me the valuable lessons you have learned from this story in the comment section and where you're watching this from. Like this video, please, and do not forget to share this video to your loved ones. You might just be changing someone's life by it. Subscribe to this channel if you're not already subscribed. Until I come your way again with another African story, for now, from me, it is bye.